Join the coven.
I've taught my crow to speak. A story written by D.L Schindler. I have a life and death from crows. It all started with the one in the yard. My older brother was going to shoot it with his BB gun. I took pity on it and took a BB into my right hand that is still there. It aches when there is a mist. I awoke to the soothing clicks and hushes of sprinklers and the warmth of a summer afternoon pouring through an open window, dreaming of the eyes of crows. I had grown so fast I had forgotten everything else. I'd learned to call them to my windowsill, and I fed them there. Then the 3 crows would leave. I could call the ones at the seafood restaurant where I worked to give them food. Once there was one in the trash, and someone had dropped the lid, trapping it. The others were all around and calling to me crazily. I opened the lid and it flew out, and they all flew away. Later, on my car, there were several gifts. 2 pennies, a car wash token, some jacket stuffing, a yellow wire, and a green pebble. I accepted the stuff on top of my car, noticing that the crows were watching to see what I would do. Years later, I was in the park with my nephews. We saw a crow and 2 falcons. I said the crow would drive them off, and it did. A few weeks later, I saw a crow driving a bald eagle. In the air, the crows outmaneuver the larger birds and spook them from above. This is due to the crow's intelligence. It knows the eagle or hawk could destroy it. The crow is relentless and smart. It knows how to take the giant down. I'd realized I had seen all of this before. Crows driving squirrels, rabbits, even cats. It was no surprise that they went after other birds. I'd once seen the crows at the seafood restaurant I worked at surround and harass a seagull to keep it from getting into the trash. They had learned the hard way that seagulls scatter trash, and then the lid got left shut. So eagles got banned by the crows. This one seagull wasn't getting the message until finally another crow showed up, as if they were waiting for this particular crow to arrive and swoop at the gull in unison. And the seagull suddenly figured out it wasn't welcome. And thus I tell thee of their ways, so that thou may ken mine. For these are the same. Together now, listen, and I shall explain. I whispered my own words. Then I said what I wanted to explain. Together I am yours, and thou art mine. For mine eyes see as yours. And you heed my call. This I know, and the secrets of your unhatched ones, the wisdom of the older and more gentle world, covered now in a layer of man. They didn't care about my words, it seemed. They had their own language, much older and wiser. I wanted to go with them and learn their stories. This was not the love that was meant to be. The worst of my days had yet to dawn. In my heart, I carried their shadows everywhere. It was a song I could always hear. Their distant calls, under each sound they made was a deeper meaning, esoteric and vast at once. Theirs was the whole world without time, and they cast their shadows over man since the beginning. They wished to show me some path. I knew not why. Here I would find a bush of strange berries. I ate them and became very sick. Then I could hear their music. It was upon the breeze as I lay in my vomit, barely conscious. I could hear the world. I could hear the sound of violins in the grass, an orchestra of crickets, and the diva was the mother of my crow. She sang, and I understood the emotion of the song. It was morning. I got up and continued to dig and accept money in the name of man as life demands. Each job was less beautiful and paid better. The crows applauded my masquerade with laughter and roasts of great merriment. I even took a woman, but it lasted only a few nights before I was tired of her words. I told her to go, and she begged to stay. I could not abide her pleas nor her presence. She ended up staying, and I left. Just as well. My real friends were on the move. Something down on the port had drawn them by the thousands at eventide. I tread the path they showed me, and alighted upon my way. They danced with their wingtips. I saw then what this was to them. 4 crows stood in a cross upon the ground of the parking lot in the center of the white light shaft. This cathedral they made, some court of maybe 1,000 crows sitting and watching in silence. I alone witnessed this. That was not of the Corvin bloodstock. The female among the 4 hopped forward and then back and flapped her wings, scattering from the other 3. The 2 crows left facing each other did fight. I had never seen 2 crows fight each other. It had rules, unlike the savage disciplines they admonished upon greater birds and beasts. They were fencing, and sometimes they would stop and admire each other. Finally, the one was struck down. The matter was settled, and all the birds took off. They did so just as the one that had stood before the 2 fighters gave one loud and shrill call. The air was battered by their wings, and a passing bat panicked in their downdraft. Only the wounded fighter and his mother remained. She hopped past him, tilting her head, and then she left him there. I can tell by their manners what their relationships are. Sometimes. This was an obviously matriarchal approach. If I misunderstood it, then there was an added complexity to her abandonment of the fallen bird. I lifted him from the ground. I took him with me. Each day I tended to his needs. I practiced my crow noises on him, and he made no response. One day he flew around my room, so I opened my window, and he flew out. He came back. From then on, he was imprinted on me, and we went everywhere. He couldn't fly well anymore. They clipped his wings during the trial by combat ritual I had witnessed. No crow spoke to him or to me when I carried him upon my shoulder. I went on walks, and he would open his wings to the breeze, as if pretending to soar. I had to get a staff to protect him from other animals, as our walks became our way. I quit my job and just lived off the money I had hoarded. As we went, I tried to speak to him with the words I knew in Corvin, but he refused to know his own language for me, so I resorted to speaking to him in my own words, sounding as much like his own language as I could. This he liked, and finally he made noises back. As we walked, I narrated the world around us, and he would repeat, sometimes adding details. Some of his details were abstract. At first I did not know what he meant. Then I realized he was telling me about stories he knew about our world. So I shared my own stories. I talked about my life and the things I had done. When he grasped the game, he told me his own life, using the language we had made to explain. His imagination was limited. He only ever spoke of places where we were. So to hear new stories, I had to take him to new places. That was easy. He guided me onto trails and paths where men had seldom, if ever, gone before. I saw springs and rocks that were from the dawn of the world and still held some magic where they stood in holy shade. "Do not look, my lord," Corey suddenly warned me. I did not heed him, and woe that I did not, for it was his words that might have spared me to know of one place and its denizen that has brought my heart to such pain. She made me look by calling me with melodious laughter from the branches and twigs that were too thick for me to penetrate. I saw her large brown eyes and her dark lips, and the speckled light on her freckled cheeks, and then the dancing one was gone, silently across the leaves like a deer. I should have known fear, for such a thing to be, and to be near it. "Must go now," Corey urged me. This time I listened, sensing that somehow I was in danger. Some time later, I saw a man walking with her. She had disguised herself to look like a woman, wearing clothing and speaking to him. Only her laughter was the same, although I knew she was sincerely delighted by him. Her sinister intentions were a secret I had to know. At the edge of our ancient glade, surrounded on all sides by apartments, she stopped him. He stood in a trance, and she shifted her form to her true shape as she fed. I watched as she extended her taproot to his heart, through his mouth. Her nourishment was the love he had to offer, and it was her justice to have it. Mankind had destroyed her world, and then forgotten her. She had done nothing to deserve this. She had given man wisdom over the forest long ago. Forgetful man had cut down her forests. She had a right to survive, and she took no more than she needed. When he had no more love to give her, she found another. She discovered I was watching her, and she changed her path. Then one day, Corey warned me. "This is too far. We have seen," Corey warned me carefully in her hybrid language. I was confronted by the creature. She stood in the early morning, barring my path with the sage smile. Her eyes tilted down on me. I knew that to see her true countenance was both an honor and a threat. She was capable of defending herself, and I knew her way. She would cloud my mind and take my love from within my heart. Yet she was not doing this. This was a parley. "Stay away. I know you're kind too, and it is not fair that you seek me." She spoke slowly, and with a gentleness I was not expecting. I felt sorry for her and agreed to stay away from her. She darted into some trees. The mists she disturbed with her sweatpants, worn over fawn legs, made my hand ache. "What is it?" Corey knew I was in pain. "My hand hurts from the mist," I complained. "The martyr," Corey said strangely. "What have you said? I don't know that word," I carefully asked. "One who dies for another," Corey spoke in reverence. He was around in the early dawn. The mist came and took his breath. He held her hand and froze that way. But her life was spared. She will always remember the martyr, she said again and again. That is her. Now we are in real danger. Corey told one of his stories. It was among the more comprehensible ones. I remind her of someone? I asked, trying to be certain I was getting the point. I will always remember you, Corey agreed. What will happen? I asked. Death will always happen, Corey told his favorite joke. Then he added thoughtfully, except when my Lord reaches down from the light and fixes the broken one's wing. That was a funny day. Indeed it was, I smiled. She will not forget, Corey decided to answer my question in his own way. She will remember. Some paths are best left unexplored. I realized, had I not met her, I would not know the dull horror I felt. I knew that her world was not meant to be mortal, and yet now it was. In her shade she was waiting to die with her sisters, every forest that was gone, a timeless creature that had learned about time. She had taught man how to love the living world, sharing her gentle wisdom long ago with an innocent species. Man, in return, had taught her about death. She had told me it was unfair. I understood this in my own way. I did not want the knowledge I had. It raged a kind of self-loathing in me, a kind of fear of the other, and of discovering there wasn't one. Just me. I was the face of this animal she had fled from and fed on. What is her name? I asked Corey, dreading that I should know the name of something as old as time. Curl. Corey knew the names of all things. It was a specialty of his. Is she the only one? I wondered. I don't know that. Corey knew something, though, and said, there must be a death. How do you know that? I wondered. Always when this is known, there must be a death. You know, now a death must be. Corey had a tone that was like, of course it's like this. We sat by the trail leading to her woods when one of the men we had seen her with was walking by us. He had a camera and a knife. My lord, he was kissed by Curl, Corey told me. I know. I got up and we followed him, Corey upon my shoulder. We stalked him as he stalked Curl. I had the advantage in the forest. My bird would go to the branches with his limited flight. I could track him with ease without giving myself away, by watching him with my spy. As he got closer to our home, I realized I was going to have to end this. His death would be the one owed. It was my fault of learning of her, yet it was his choice to be here. Was I being superstitious? I chuckled. In the cool shade of the mists there pained me. He had the knife out in one hand, having found something that his fears obsessed to him. I came up behind the young man with more silence than I thought I could. I used my staff on the back of his head and knocked him out cold. I had to drag him back out of the forest across a carpet of painful mist. I had his knife, knowing that there must be death. When I found a place far from her home along the trail, I was so exhausted from dragging him that I couldn't do it. Corey fluttered down and asked, "Will he die, my lord?" Corey asked. "You know that," I nodded. I took up the knife and turned his head sideways. Then I quickly plunged it into the base of his skull and into his brain, severing his spinal cord. This would be where he died. not in our forest. You are dead now, Corey told the corpse. Why did you do that? I asked him. So that he will know he is dead. It happened while he was asleep. He was confused. It is okay now. He says it is okay. Corey jumped up onto the dead man's chest. Open his mouth. I did heed my crow and forced the man's mouth open. Corey inhaled the man's last breath. I asked, was that his soul you were taking? His soul already left. Corey sounded amused. I was just sniffing the feast to come. Even though my way is with you, others will come and enjoy this. A murder of crows, I nodded. I watched as Corey went up to the face and ate the man's right eye. Then I wiped my fingerprints off the knife handle. That's enough. Yes, my lord. Corey obeyed and returned to my shoulder. We left him there, without an apology, and his spirit drifted away, presumably. The sun was appearing in the sky, and the mists burned away. I will not forget. I heard a whisper of Curl's voice on the breeze. This made me smile.